One looming invasion. Four secret minds. As humanity plans in the shadows, the universe reveals a terrifying truth. Silence is survival. Welcome to Liu Cixin's The Dark Forest. The Dark Forest, spanning 512 pages, is the second installment in Liu Cixin's acclaimed Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy, following the three-body problem. Originally published in Chinese in the year 2008, just a few years after its predecessor, it gained a significant international recognition following Joel Martinson's English translation in the year 2015. While the three-body problem wove together multiple timelines, alternating between early 2000s China and flashbacks to the Cultural Revolution, The Dark Forest picks up where the first novel concluded and propels the story forward into humanity's uncertain future. The sequel adopts a more linear and conventional narrative structure, incorporating classic science fiction elements such as hibernation and life extension to maintain continuity across time. As a result, the story takes greater liberties with technological plausibility and scientific realism compared to its predecessor. However, this shift in approach does not diminish the originality of Liu Cixin's ideas. The Dark Forest is rich with thought-provoking concepts, the most notable being the Dark Forest hypothesis, which originated from this very novel and will be discussed in more detail later in the review. In addition, the story introduces creative and distinctive solutions to seemingly insurmountable challenges, such as the methods humanity adopts to evade constant surveillance by an advanced alien force. The scope of the narrative is greatly expanded, not only in terms of time and world building, but also in the size and complexity of the cast. With a few exceptions, most of the main and supporting characters are new to this installment and, in my view, are more thoroughly developed. Not every character leaves a lasting impression, but many do, particularly the protagonist, Luo Ji. Initially portrayed as morally ambiguous and detached, seemingly using his resources for selfish purposes, Luo Ji ultimately emerges as humanity's final hope. His journey from reluctant participant to central figure in the fate of civilization is both compelling and unexpected. Despite its depth and ambition, The Dark Forest was somewhat overlooked in terms of major literary awards. Based on my research, it was nominated for the Goodreads Choice Award for Science Fiction in 2015, but did not receive a broader recognition. It is possible that it received other, more niche accolades. Nevertheless, public reception has been overwhelmingly positive. The novel holds an impressive average rating of 4.4 out of 5 stars across various review platforms, surpassing the first book's average of 4.1. In terms of adaptations, The Dark Forest has inspired several creative projects, mostly fan-led and unofficial, yet notable for their ambition. One such work is Waterdrop, a 14-minute tribute film centered on the Trisolaran droplet probe. Directed by Wong Ren, then a graduate student at Columbia University, it captured the tone of Liu Cixin's vision so effectively that the author himself remarked, and I quote here, "This is the kind of film I have in mind. If the feeling of such an atmosphere can be delivered in a three-body problem film, I would rest in peace after I die." End quote. Another fan project, MC Three-Body, The Dark Forest, began as a Minecraft-based machinima before evolving into a more polished animated series using professional software. It was released online in early 2018. More recently, a full-length Chinese animated series based on The Dark Forest aired from December 2022 to March 2023, bringing the story to a wider domestic audience. Additionally, the BBC Studios produced documentary series Rendezvous with the Future, released by Bilibili in November 2022, explores the scientific ideas behind Liu Cixin's work. The second episode delves into concepts featured in The Dark Forest, including the space elevator and artificial hibernation. As of now, no international version has been released. At this point, I must issue a spoiler warning for major plot elements from The Three-Body Problem and to a lesser extent The Dark Forest. If you have not read these books and wish to experience them without spoilers, now is the time to pause. You have been warned, heed the warning signs and skip forward to the end of the video. In The Dark Forest, Earth is left reeling from the shocking revelation that an alien invasion is on its way, set to arrive in approximately 4 centuries. Although the Trisolaran sympathizers on Earth have been defeated, the threat is far from over. The aliens continue to monitor every action taken on Earth through the Sophons, subatomic particles that allow Trisolaris to instantaneously observe all forms of human communication and computation. This makes any conventional defense planning virtually impossible. The only remaining sanctuary is the human mind itself. This insight gives rise to the Wallfacer Project, a bold initiative that grants 4 individuals nearly unlimited authority and resources to devise secret plans that exist solely in their minds. These strategies are to be carried out through misdirection, misinformation, and calculated deception, shielded from both Earth's institutions and the alien observers. 3 of the chosen Wallfacers are globally respected statesmen and scientists. The 4th, however, is a complete mystery. Luo Ji, a quiet, unambitious Chinese astronomer and sociologist. His sudden elevation to global strategic importance confuses everyone, most of all himself. Yet, it quickly becomes clear that he is not just any Wallfacer. He is the only one whom Trisolaris explicitly seeks to eliminate. Luo Ji, as the clear outsider among the 4 Wallfacers, receives near limitless resources, yet rather than diving into grand strategy or science, he uses this unprecedented power to retreat into an idyllic, dreamlike life. He settles in a remote and beautiful corner of the world, accompanied by his dream partner, living in a spacious home surrounded by nature. It is not a palace, nor is it filled with vulgar luxury. Strangely, this escapist fantasy is quite enjoyable to read, especially when contrasted with the other 3 Wallfacers who consume even greater resources in their bold, complex and often exhausting plans to save humanity. However, this dream life is not without its melancholy. It eventually reveals a deeper layer of Luo Ji's personality, his sense of detachment, his profound imposter syndrome and his emotional vulnerability. Liu Cixin's choice to portray Luo Ji not as a hedonist or materialist, but as someone chasing a simple and relatable dream, ensures that he remains a sympathetic and human protagonist. Even the ethically somewhat questionable element of requesting his ideal partner, though it plays out with unexpected consequences, serves to highlight his internal conflict rather than diminish his character. Turning to the other Wallfacers, their strategies at first appear more traditional or rational, yet upon closer examination their plans also reflect different forms of deterrence, deception, or long-term thinking aimed at securing humanity's eventual survival. For example, the strategy employed by Bill Hines may seem like a failure on the surface, but as sharp readers of the trilogy will recognize, it achieves a certain measure of success in its own right, even if accidentally. A recurring theme throughout the entire trilogy, and particularly in The Dark Forest, is Liu Cixin's clear skepticism regarding collective human behavior. He portrays the masses as easily swayed, emotionally reactive, and prone to exaggerated beliefs about their own capabilities. In simpler terms, naive, short-sighted, and often foolish. In the first novel, these traits were especially evident in the chapters set during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. In The Dark Forest, similar criticisms are directed toward future generations, depicted as impulsive and overconfident, in stark contrast to the more grounded and experienced characters from our contemporary timeline. One extreme example of this is humanity's disastrous response to the arrival of the first Trisolaran probe, where a combined fleet of human ships charges ahead with reckless optimism, only to meet utter and humiliating defeat. Another example is the global decision to ban interstellar escapism, the idea of sending part of humanity away to ensure its survival elsewhere. Rather than seeing this as a strategic backup plan, humanity equates it with cowardice and defeatism. This reflects not only pettiness but also a dangerous lack of foresight. Critics may view these portrayals as overly pessimistic or even unrealistic. One might argue that Liu Cixin harbors a rather dim view of humanity as a whole. However, history provides some justification, most notably in the Cultural Revolution, where mass hysteria, cruelty, and ideological zeal led to enormous suffering. While less extreme, recent political polarization in the West, or the rigid social conformity seen during crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic, where any deviation from the dominant narrative was often treated as betrayal, also point to the enduring tendency of human masses to suppress dissent and critical thought. 10 years ago, I personally might have considered Liu Cixin's view of humanity to be overly cynical. Today, I no longer do. Now, regarding the Dark Forest hypothesis itself, perhaps the most memorable and widely discussed idea in the novel, it offers a compelling explanation for the Fermi paradox and is grounded in game theory. As the thought experiment, it is deeply unsettling. In a universe where every civilization must assume that all others are potential threats, the only rational strategy is to remain hidden or to strike first. However, there are also well-grounded arguments against the validity of the Dark Forest hypothesis. See the linked video as just one example. While this concept is introduced late in the novel as the foundation for a decisive solution, I must admit it challenged my suspension of disbelief a little bit. The underlying logic of deterrence and mutually assured destruction is certainly not foreign to humanity. These concepts have even existed long before nuclear weapons came into play. In fact, chemical warfare was largely avoided during the Second World War for precisely this reason. The threat of retaliation was simply too great. Given that, one might reasonably wonder why humanity in the novel does not more quickly arrive at the realization that revealing the location of another civilization, namely Trisolaris, could be catastrophically dangerous. After all, first contact had already led to open hostility, and it should have been apparent early on that broadcasting any location into the cosmic unknown is an enormous gamble. Of course, we as readers have a key advantage. We already know how Ye Wenji initiated first contact in The Three-Body Problem, and we are aware that even within Trisolaris there were dissenting voices advocating for peace. This context shapes our understanding in a way the characters in the Dark Forest do not share. In that sense, perhaps, it is even fitting, if not poetic, that Ye Wenji also laid the intellectual groundwork that eventually enables Luoji to conceive of the Dark Forest hypothesis. Thus her actions bridged both the beginning of contact and indirectly the ultimate theory that defines the harsh cosmic logic of Liu Cixin's universe. The symmetry adds another layer of tragic inevitability, reinforcing the novel's underlying theme that the universe may not only be silent, but also deliberately so. To a lesser extent, the Dark Forest hypothesis is not only applicable to alien civilizations, but also extends to human behavior under extreme conditions. This becomes particularly evident when a group of ships finds itself alone in interstellar space. Among this small fleet, especially within the higher-ranking officers of the vessels, the logic of the Dark Forest is adopted with disturbing speed and cold efficiency. The resulting acts of violence are swift, calculated and brutal, aimed at ensuring individual survival over collective cooperation. In isolation, these actions might seem excessive. However, Liu Cixin effectively conveys the psychological disintegration that can occur when a small fleet of ships is cut off from any connection to Earth, adrift in the vast, indifferent emptiness of space. It is a chilling exploration of what happens when human beings are forced to stare into the abyss, aware that the resources around them are scarce and survival is not guaranteed for all. Overall, The Dark Forest by Liu Cixin is not only a worthy sequel to The Three-Body Problem, but in many ways it surpasses it. It expands the scope of the narrative significantly, broadening the stakes, exploring new locations and stretching the timeline across centuries. While the novel takes greater liberties with scientific plausibility, it never loses coherence. The extrapolations remain grounded within the logic established earlier in the series, and the speculative elements feel purposeful rather than indulgent. The characters are more well-rounded and emotionally complex than those in the first installment. Luoji in particular is a compelling and relatable protagonist whose arc is central to both the story and its philosophical core. What truly sets The Dark Forest apart, however, is the breadth of its ideas. From the various strategies humanity devises to confront an existential threat, to the imaginative technological and societal developments that unfold over centuries, the novel offers a constant stream of intriguing concepts. Equally compelling are the questions Liu Cixin raises about humanity itself, especially the limitations of collective behavior, the moral pitfalls of mass psychology, and the ease with which fear and ego can override rationality. In short, I would go so far as to say that The Dark Forest is the strongest entry in the trilogy. While I do have reservations about the final book, Death's End, a discussion for another time, this middle chapter stands out for its intellectual ambition, emotional depth, and masterful world building. If you liked this video, you may also enjoy the other reviews and content on my channel. Feel free to leave a comment if you want to discuss the novels or if you want to suggest other books that I should review in the future. Please consider upvoting and subscribing, it is much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and until next time.